Thank you very much. So good evening and welcome to Rugby Borough Council's Planning Committee today, the 4th of November. And apologies that we had to postpone this meeting because we had such severe technical issues for the last one. My name is Councillor Catherine Lawrence and I'm the committee chairman. This meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being attended by members of the committee through Microsoft Teams. With me, I have the support of the following officers: Stephanie Gibray, our Head of Growth and Investment, Sarah Chapman, our Legal Advisor, Claire Wallachek and Veronica Beckhover from Democratic Services, and our Planning Officers Joe Orton and Thomas Leach. Before we begin working through the agenda, I'll go through some of the rules on procedure. As set out in the introduction, this meeting is being web streamed to the public and is being monitored by IT services. If at any point there are any streaming issues, then I will be informed and the meeting will be adjourned until such time that the technological issues can be resolved. If during the course of the meeting any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, it will continue. It will be deemed that the member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. If it is my connection that goes, then the Vice Chair will assume control of the meeting. For officers and speakers, can you please make sure your microphones and cameras are switched off, and I will call you to speak at the appropriate times. For committee members, your microphones and cameras should be switched off unless you're speaking. And if you wish to ask a question on the officer's report or during debate, please use the raise hand function and wait for me to ask you to speak. Voting during virtual meetings will be using the raise hand function. Are there any questions before we move into the formal agenda? I will now ask our Democratic Services Officer to confirm the attendees at this meeting. Your name will be called out and can you please confirm your attendance?
Thank you, Chair. So going alphabetically, Councillor Mrs Brown.
No.
Councillor Mrs Brown, you need to unmute and respond.
So sorry, yes, I'm here.
Councillor Kieran Brown.
Present.
Councillor Butlin. Councillor Cranham.
Present.
Councillor Eccleston.
Present.
Okay.
Councillor Mrs Garcia.
Present.
Councillor Gillias.
Present.
Councillor Miss Lawrence.
Present.
Councillor Picker.
Present.
Councillor Roodhouse.
On mute. Yes, present.
Councillor Sanderson.
Present.
And Councillor Srivastava.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we will now move into the formal agenda. Agenda item 1 are minutes to confirm minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September 2020. All those in favour, please raise their hands.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. You may lower your hands. Agenda item 2 are apologies. To receive apologies for absence from the meeting. Do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. Agenda item 3 are declarations of interest. To receive declarations of A, non-pecuniary interests as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. Councillor Garcia.
Yes, on application R200496, as I do frequent the applicant's restaurant.
Thank you. Councillor Gillias.
Yes, Rugby Borough's parish champion, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Yes, Chair. R20/0496. The application site is within my ward of Eastlands.
Thank you. Councillor Roodhouse. You're muted, Councillor.
The same as Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. Right. Are there any other under Declaration A? Okay, in that case, you can take your hands down. Under B, pecuniary interest as defined by the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. And C, notice under Section 106 Local Government Finance Act 1992, non-payment of community charge or council tax. Okay. So we move on to agenda item 4, applications for consideration. And we have got 3 applications for consideration tonight. The first application is R200496 regarding 68 Church Street, Rugby, change of use from an A2 financial services to A3 restaurant and A5 takeaway, including the installation of an external flue and external door. And Thomas Leach is the officer to present.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just load up the presentation. Could I have it confirmed that my screen is visible on the stream, please?
Yes, I can confirm that I can see it.
I can see it.
Thank you.
If anybody can't, could you raise your hand, please? Okay, I don't have any hands raised, so you can continue, Thomas.
Thank you very much. This evening, this application before you relates to 68 Church Street in the Rugby Town Centre. This is a full application for change of use of the ground floor of the building from a financial and professional services use to a restaurant and takeaway. As mentioned, the application also includes the installation of an external flue and door to the building. The application has been requested to be called into the committee members by Councillor Shearer for discussion on the proposal. For context, 68 Church Street very much sits at the heart of both the Rugby Town Centre conservation area and the primary shopping area as defined within the local plan. It sits on a very prominent corner where Church Walk meets Church Street and sits adjacent to the Grade 2 star listed St Andrew's Church to the west hand side of where this red outline is shown on the image here. Moving on to the context of the building, it is itself Grade 2 listed. Historically, it has been used as a financial services facility. There is historic applications relating to it previously as the Nationwide Building Society, and after that, most recently as a money shop. Records suggest that the building has been vacant since 2019 following the administration of the money shop, and the first, second and third floors above the building are presently in use as 5 flats. Moving on to the principle of development, the application involves a change of use to a restaurant and a takeaway. Being in the town centre, this is the most sustainable location within the borough. The proposal has been considered to not harm the retail function of the town centre. It will not, as a result of this, involve the loss of a retail unit, with it being a financial services use historically. An assessment needs to be made as to whether the proposal would represent a coalescence or over-concentration of such usages as where we look for within the local plan. And an assessment was made along the row of which it relates to along Church Street and opposite, and it was considered it neither would represent a coalescence with Rugby and Wraps being an A1 unit next door, and with a varied mixture of takeaways, restaurants along that stretch and financial services across the road, serving TSB, or rather HSBC and Lloyds Bank. Therefore, the principle of the use as such is considered acceptable, but subject to all other material planning considerations. And I wish to move on to the point really of the considerations of residential amenity design and designated heritage assets, which form part of the site and the surrounding context. Moving on to the plans that have been submitted, To the left-hand side here, you see an indicative floor plan which shows it as a restaurant set up internally, kitchen facilities at the back, and with a bin storage area to the side of the building indicated on the photograph to the right-hand side here. Also within this alleyway would be an external flue which would serve the proposed use as indicated on the right-hand side. For reference, this flue would be to the left-hand wall here. Just to emphasise that these are the proposed changes that would be resultant from the external changes of the proposal. So the bin storage, the external door and the external ventilation flue. To build a bit of a context and colour to the actual site itself, for context, the image on the left-hand side here shows the approach of the rear of the building. The Juliet balcony you see centre to the image serves a residential flat. The flue would be sited between this and on the blind elevation of the building where the alleyway is. So you've got the rear of the build application site here. You've got the Church Street apartments, which were more recently built, comprising of flats to the centre right of the left-hand image. And again, the centre images show the alleyway where the flue would be sited, with the image on the right-hand side showing where the rough approximate siting of where the flue would be sited. For reference, the width of the wall-to-wall displayed on the centre and the right-hand image is 1.7 metres in width. So it represents quite a constrained narrow space with context of of where this flue and bin storage will be sited. With regard to how this translates into local planning or applicable local planning policies, there's a real emphasis ensuring that developments not only represent good design, but there's also protection given to the amenity of other surrounding properties when development occurs. And this is not just necessarily applicable just to SDC 1 with sustainable design alone. It's also apparent within SDC 3, which relates to the borough's protection of designated heritage assets. And it's also replicated within each of the relevant town centre policies as well. There's a real emphasis on trying to get an appropriate scale and design of quality and ensuring that development really ensure it's harmonious with surrounding usages. So it's that emphasis on design and amenity and the harmonious sort of usages within what would be expected within a modern town centre. Moving on to the issues really in terms of amenity and design. It's accepted that the flue would be on the least publicly visible elevation available to the building, being on that blind alley. It wouldn't necessarily be viewed in particular context with the Grade 2 star listed St Andrew's Church or wider, more visible elements of the town centre conservation area. The termination of the duct to the flue would be partially visible from Church Walk, as was shown on that image previously, but it has been indicated on the proposed plans to terminate below the ridge of the host building. So in terms of visual appearance, it would not necessarily appear unduly prominent. However, given where the flue would be sited, it brings a constraint really with what the surrounding usages are applicable in this instance with the building, and particularly the flats on the first floors and the second floor of the building, where the ground floor would be served by this restaurant and takeaway. Also to add that there is flats as well immediately next to the site at 66 Church Street in the more recently built apartment block. With both the application site and the neighbouring property, they each share an elevation with the alleyway, which was shown in the previous images, where the flue would be sited, including in some instances windows would be within those elevations. As part of the consultation process of the application, as officers, we've discussed this with environmental services, who would essentially use a technical consultee they would assess whether a flue would adequately function with regard to providing means of adequate dispersal of odour, also the susceptibility of noise and vibrations to wood close occupiers to the site. And as part of that consultation, they've come back and suggested that the application is unacceptable and found difficulty to find a solution really in this instance to find a flue. And as such, they're both concerned that how not only would the flue look in appearance and how it would really lack in function in order to not protect, well, it would inadequately protect against residential occupiers on the above floors of the building itself and the neighbouring occupiers of the site to each residential. I mean, in some instances where, say, Environmental Health would feel such a technical solution could be found, they would normally request a condition which would be required prior to any development of the building taking place. So they would suggest that ventilation flue would be, details as such would be required and then be considered as whether they would be appropriate on with regards to their legislation. And that would normally be done by a condition, but as mentioned in this instance, they've recommended refusal given the constraints that are apparent with this particular site. As such, with the flue, it was considered that it would have an unacceptable level of noise and odour pollution to the residential occupiers above the proposed unit and next to the proposed unit, with the flue being necessary for the restaurant and takeaway to adequately function. With what is proposed, the odours would not be adequately dispersed, and again, the residential occupiers would be subject to noise. And with regard to that, it would, with what is essentially proposed, it would fail to comply with each of the relevant policies, SDC1, which seeks high quality design, SDC3, which seeks a high development value to heritage assets, and the TC3, which is town centre related policy, which seeks that such usages are harmonious with other usages in the immediate context. Moving on to the actual impact on designated heritage assets itself, there would be some loss of fabric involved with installation of the flue. It was considered that it would present a less than substantial harm given what has been submitted on the plans itself. With it there being less than substantial harm identified, an assessment has to be made on the public benefits provided against the harm identified in this case. The applicant has submitted information to suggest there's not been interest expressed other than for restaurant or takeaway usages since the building has been marketed, and this would in effect provide a vacant unit with a potentially more viable use, being a takeaway or a restaurant in this instance. With a building being in use, this could potentially enhance the setting of the conservation area and also provide a more viable use for the building with a greater flexibility. However, the harm identified would be outweigh any such benefit derived from this proposal. And again, really it's that loss of residential harm identified and some minor loss of historic fabric to the building in order to allow for that change of use. And again, it fails to comply with SDC3 with that harm identified not outweighing the benefits which have been presented as part of this proposal. With regards to other matters, there's been no other technical objections received from whether highways, ecology or work services following consultation with the application. With regard to air quality, the site is in the air quality management area and this feeds into HS5 of the local plan. The distinction to be made with this is whilst the reason for refusal identifies odour as being a particular problematic in this instance, what HS5 and air quality relates to is more to do with the air quality involved with particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide. So this would normally be, I guess, for a domestic scale, we'd be looking at boilers, car, vehicle generation. But in no such instance, if the proposal was considered to be acceptable, we would look for informatives as opposed to a required condition to ensure that the proposal would be air quality neutral. Just to note as well, no listed building consent has been submitted in conjunction with the application. Whilst this is unusual and the agent was made aware of it, it would be still necessary for any of the external works, at least including the flue, for details of that to be submitted and assessed with regard to the historic building element of the proposal. I know regarding the use class order, which is coming into effect during the course of the application, the unit does now benefit from Class C within the new regulations, but nonetheless, the application has been considered against the adopted local national policy in force. And as such, moving on to the balance and recommendation in this instance, the benefits presented again do not outweigh the harm identified from the proposal. The proposal represents poor design and would result in an unacceptable loss of residential amenity to occupiers above and next to the unit, particularly through noise and odour pollution. And as such, I recommend refusal for the reason detailed within the draft decision notice. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive presentation, which I think covered all the necessary points. I'm sure there are going to be a few questions of clarification. I note in your report that you say that residents had been contacted and there were no objections received from any of the residents in any of the flats surrounding this particular development. Is that correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Does anybody else have a question of clarification? Councillor Garcia.
Yes, I would just like to ask on the bit about the use class order 2020, which came into effect on the 1st of September. Now, presumably, if the applicant was to withdraw this and reapply, he would get the planning permission anyway.
With regard to the flexible use class orders, what is now being presented with the use class order rather, restaurants are included within that new flexible use class, so would be apparent within the instance of this particular site. Nonetheless, the external changes again would require consent, both listed building consent as operational development. But I think the question, if it strictly regards to the use, yes, it can be what would be typically before being A3 unit, that would be available for the unit. I have no reason to believe that it would not be so, given that it has historically been an A2 unit, and that would be available as a potential flexible use.
So the answer to Councillor Garcia's question was yes. Councillor Butlin, you're next. You're muted, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one question. Is the decibel rating on the extraction unit been itemised anywhere in the minutes? Because you talk about noise from the extraction units. Is there a decibel rating on it?
I haven't received any, well, there's not been any proposed details relating to what noise would be generated by the flue as such. With regards to the environmental services comments, they have been again consulted on the application, and I suppose you feed in what you put in, what we'd then expect from that. Whether they could provide clarity on what would be an acceptable level, I have to admit I'm unsure of. I can source the comments that would have been formed part of the environmental services response to the application, and I believe they may be available on the application file on the website, but I haven't got the decibel levels given that there's no details provided such as part of the application.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to follow up on that, Councillor Butlin, or not?
No, thank you. I've got what I want.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Question to the officer. I know that the environmental services are at 2.14 have made quite a strong statement in terms that they don't think the flue could be successfully integrated into the fabric of the building. And I know there isn't a listed building consent supplied with the application. You presumably would want to be satisfied, but both of those requirements were being met by the applicants. I mean, when I looked at the building, I thought, could they run the flue up through
Councillor Sanderson, I said question only, please.
It is a question.
You're going into too much detail. So
okay, well, let me answer that bit and I'll come back on the other one.
Thank you. Thomas, I'm assuming then that should councillors approve this, that it would be conditioned.
The question regarding whether listed building consent would require a separate application itself. I mean, in terms of if it were mindful to be recommended for approval, I suppose a condition may be necessary to ensure that a subsequent listed building consent application be submitted.
So the answer is yes. Thank you. Councillor Srivastava, your hand is up next. And you're muted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the comments is insufficient information on flue installation. What that means? If we get some information that will improve it. There was a comment on the list, is insufficient information on flue installation.
So, Thomas, do you have any additional information on flue installation?
The only information that's been submitted which indicates the flue is the elevation plan which has been provided, which shows the flue terminating below the ridge level and above the eaves level with an approximate sighting, but there is no information that's been submitted with any detail of what this flue entails, its visual appearance, other than an indicative sighting. So we're unable really to establish that, okay, yes, it would be acceptable or not.
Councillor Eccleston.
Thanks.
Yeah, hi. Well, Councillor Butlin asked one of my questions, but the other question was, it all seems to be around the flue, and you just touched on there about the height of the flue. Has consideration been given to taking the flue above the eaves of the current building?
I think with the evolving the application, we've looked at each available elevation in the context of the site quite thoroughly, and with the context around not only the building itself but the wider conservation area, we looked at both the elevation facing St Andrew's Church, which we consider a complete non-starter in terms of visual appearance, and similarly so for the rear elevation available to the building. I think the difficulty with when it comes into the realms of making the flue terminate above the ridge level, it all of a sudden starts to become a lot more visible in appearance, which again, given the context of the site, it would be something which, given that we're pretty much at the heart of the conservation area and arguably probably one of the most iconic buildings within Rugby Town Centre itself, it's just something which we, as officers, in terms of visual harm to the listed building at least, would be considered inappropriate.
Thank you. Although I assume it would depend on the angle that you're looking at the building as to whether you could see it above the building or not. Councillor Gillius.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, the drawings of the flue are fairly basic. The ones I've had experience with are normally vertical with a cowl over the top to stop ingress of moisture. The angle of that flue, I'm just trying to work out how on earth they stop prevailing rain getting in down, running straight down the flue. Have you got any technical detail on that?
Simple answer, no. I've only got the elevation plan that's been submitted.
Thank you. Okay. Next, I've got Councillor Sanderson again.
Technical question. Could the flue be integrated into the large chimney breasts above the building? I note that they were up to 3 meters high.
Thank you. Do you have that technical knowledge, Thomas?
I would anticipate that may present quite a great difficulty with regard to potential modification with the building, but we've not looked at that potential solution.
So we don't actually have detail on that. Councillor Srivastava, your hand, is it still up or is this another question? And you're muted. Right, thank you. Okay, so I think we've gone through all the questions that were needed. My legal advisor would like to speak. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Just in response to a couple of points raised by members, which were good points in relation to listed building consent and the use classes order. If I could just draw your attention to paragraph 9.1 to 9.2 and 9.3 of the report. This does cover it, and just to make clear that whilst the change of use could be permitted development, the operational development such as the external alterations and the installation of a flue in order to facilitate that use would still require planning permission and its accompanying listed building consent. Listed building consent would probably be put on as an informative rather than a condition, and then if listed building consent wasn't obtained prior to the use being implemented or a planning permission being implemented, we would look to take enforcement action in a normal manner, if that assists.
Right, thank you very much for that clarification. Thank you, committee. So we will now go into debate. Who would like to start? Councillor Garcia.
Hi, right, I'm not quite sure where to start actually. I don't know whether I feel shocked that anybody in this day and age actually wants to open another business in Rugby, or whether it's just a flu that's stopping them opening a business in Rugby. I feel that as he would get the change anyway, and the local agent says he's only had interest for restaurants and takeaways, the fact that it's offering jobs in Rugby, I feel that I would like to propose this for approval. I think there's actually much more going for this application than there is against it, and I think it can't be beyond having dealt with ventilation flues in my own business. I just cannot believe that this can be beyond some sort of find some sort of way round it, and I just think that possibly we ought to send it for approval, which he'd get anyway, and then it's up to him to put in another application to have the flue and the planning listed building consent done at a later date.
Right, so this is on economic grounds and town centre redevelopment, yes?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson, you're next. Need to unmute Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. This is a unique building in a prominent location in Church Street, which the Victorian Society recognise has quite significant architectural merit. The flue position, I feel, would have a detrimental effect, as the report says, on the amenity of the residential properties which were approved not very long ago. Clearly, their amenity has to be taken into account, as the report clearly states, in terms of odour and emissions from odours to their homes. I therefore would support the officer's recommendation for refusal at this time. I would say to those who would perhaps want to go for approval, this is not the application. It needs significant amendment. It needs to have that listed building consent so it actually meets the requirements of this council's policies. For that reason, I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have a lot of sympathy with both what Councillor Sanderson said and with what Councillor Garcia said, because on the one hand, I mean, I walk past the unit every day I want to go into the town centre. It is vacant, it is shabby, it desperately needs bringing directly back into economic use in the town centre, especially given the climate we currently face. We want to try and get that back. However, there are fairly substantial issues with the application as it sits, particularly in relation, as we've already heard, to the flue and the impact on residential amenity. So I suppose I almost have a question for officers, which is, because obviously we don't have a list of conditions in front of us today that we can look at and examine because it's been recommended for refusal. So were committee minded to approve this today, would we be able to have a condition that no work could begin on this property without something relating to the flue being accepted by officers to prevent this from having to go through the entire rigmarole again? And Sarah's hand has gone straight up.
Thank you, Sarah. Do you want to respond to that, please?
Yep, you absolutely could. What I would suggest, you would delegate authority to officers to draft the conditions for you, and you could absolutely suggest conditions that you would like to have included, and one of them could be a pre-commencement condition for acceptable details of the flue to be submitted and approved by the local planning authority.
Thank you very much. Councillor Butlin.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. The officer kind of made a really good case for approval until he started talking about the flue. And there's three aspects to the flue that we've got to consider. One was the visual asset, the noise, and the other one was the smell. First, in terms of the visuals, we are down the non-visual part of a listed building where hardly anybody can see. And in terms of a visual asset, I would say it was nil. So I don't think it's going to have a detrimental effect on the visual side of that building. And it certainly can't be seen from the street side because of the angle in which anybody will be viewing that building. Also, it comes out at above the eaves, but below the pitch of the roof. I would basically argue that the incidence of any smell derived from that flue would be kind of negligible, and it'd have to be a very, very adverse weather conditions to get a reverse flow back down into that anyway. The other one is kind of time of usage in terms of, I don't know what they're opening as, but I would assume something in the region of kind of like they would not be working much beyond below, say, 10:30. So most people go to sleep or go into their bedrooms at 10:30, and most people are out at work at the rest of the time. The other thing was, as it's already been voiced here, it's a building now. It's kind of going into disrepair. It looks shabby on that corner, and what is an iconic position of from the view from the clock towers and also viewing up to the church. And they have been unsuccessful in finding a tenant for any other use than this. We are going into a lockdown. We've got the adverse effects on retail on our towns as we speak as a result of the COVID crisis. And retail itself is going into a crisis. And on balance, and this is what this was about, on balance, I took the view that this could be acceptable. In terms of the other aspect of it is modern flues have got carbon filters, and they kind of do an awful lot of technology goes into kind of keeping the noise levels down. When I asked about the decibel rating, he didn't know. Well, how can you assess something if you didn't, as being too noisy, if you didn't know what the noise levels were going to be? So I felt they were making a kind of an argument without the evidence to support that argument. So on the basis that on balance, benefit to the town centre, benefit to jobs, and benefit to the look of the main street view, I would I second approval of this application, subject to them getting the final details on that flue in terms of the decibel rating, and also the fact that it'll have carbon filters in it. So on that basis, I'd move for approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Srivastava. You're muted, Councillor. You need to unmute.
I was going to support the proposal by Councillor Gracia. I think there is economic benefits to the town. Lot of shops in the area is closed, more or less empty, and somebody is trying to put the business back business in the town. There are some flu issues which have been highlighted. I think there should be, officers should be able to put some conditions and solve that. So I'd support the proposal.
Thank you.
I support the proposal by Councillor Gracia.
Thank you. Councillor Eccleston?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether there's two proposals on the cards or three proposals on the cards here at the moment, but I support Councillor Picker's view that it needs conditions attached to it, and I think Councillor Butlin referred to that as well. So I'm not quite sure where we are in terms of proposals, but I certainly support both what Councillor Picker said and Councillor Butlin.
I think if councillors are minded to approve, it would be subject to conditions, as Sarah Chapman, our legal advisor, has pointed out, conditions and informatives.
Thank you.
Right, where are we next? Councillor Garcia, your hand is still up, or is this a new one? Okay.
Sorry. No, I put it up again just to clarify that I might not have put it very eloquently, but I did feel that the, what was it, planning, historic buildings consent and the flu needed some sort of conditioning.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Roodhouse, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, listening to the debate and the balance, I think, which is, as Councillor Butlin alluded to, and I'm glad Councillor Picker raised, I think with the conditions, and Sarah Chapman's confirmed that, and putting those conditions on it and delegate to officers to do that, on balance, I think it should go for approval.
Thank you very much. Right, are there any other points before we move to a vote? Councillor Sanderson, your hand is still up, yeah. So is Councillor Garcia.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, I think with condition, but one of those conditions is that this flu should be to the satisfaction of environmental services. They are the experts, not the planning officer.
Okay, thank you. Joanne Orton, as our senior planning officer, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, please, Chair. If members are minded to approve the application, would it be possible for members to consider delegating powers to the officers to put on there? Then we can negotiate an appropriately worded condition with environmental services to go on any decision notice.
Yes, I think that is what Councillor Garcia and Councillor Butlin are proposing, that it would be approval subject to delegation to officers for conditions and informatives. Councillor Picker and then Councillor Sanderson.
Oops. Yeah, just to go back to the conditions that were or have been discussed, I do feel it is important that relating to the flu, it is a pre-commencement condition. So I don't know whether the rest of the committee is minded to agree with that, but that would be my view.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Sanderson and then Councillor Garcia.
I go along with Councillor Picker. It does have to be a pre-commencement condition.
Thank you. Right, we've got Councillor Garcia and then Councillor Gillies, and then we'll move to a vote.
Could I just say that actually I don't think that all takeaways need a flu, and it depends what he's doing with this takeaway as to whether you need that before he opens his business. If he's just doing sandwiches, he doesn't need the flu, does he? So I think that's pretty harsh on stopping somebody trying to get the business up and running, to put that sort of condition on.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Garcia, appreciate the point you're raising. Maybe a more appropriate condition would be that the extraction arrangements, however it's appropriately worded in technical language, are submitted to and approved by the local planning authority prior to commencement of development, because I assume he'll know what kind of business he's hoping to run beforehand, and we can sign those off. So it may not be a flue, but whatever the appropriate extraction methods required are, could be the pre-commencement condition.
Thank you. And Councillor Gillius, the final word is going to you before we vote.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think as Councillor Garcia has already said, I mean, you've got to be a brave person to, open up a business now. And I think, nothing ventured, nothing gained is the old motto. And we've seen it have a number of uses over the years. So let the guy have a go. And if he makes a success, fantastic. If he doesn't, well, he's give it a go anyway.
Thank you very much. Right, we're going to move to the vote, which has been approval has been proposed by Councillor Garcia and seconded by Councillor Butlin, and it is approval mainly on economic and regeneration of the town centre economy, subject to conditions and informatives that will be agreed by the officers and us. Right, so all those in favour, please show. Okay, Claire, can you tell me how we're doing on those four?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, so that's 12-4, is it?
Yes.
No against. Everybody can take their hands down. Okay, so no against and no abstentions. In that case, we are going against officer recommendation and approving that application subject to conditions and informatives to be agreed before any work should commence. Is that in order, Sarah?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, right, we now move on to the second application, R19/1411, and as we have speakers, I need to outline the way in which we will deal with our speakers. So the planning officer will speak first and present the application. Representatives for the objectors, the applicants, and then the ward councillor will each be invited to speak. After each speaker, committee members will be asked if they have any points of clarification from the speaker. Any ward member or councillor who speaks on an application as part of the public speaking process shall leave the meeting once all the speakers have completed their presentations. Members of committee will then go into debate on the application and a formal recommendation will be made and voted on. All remaining speakers on the application will then be asked to leave after the vote and can view the rest of the meeting via the live stream on the council's website. Speakers, can I remind you that you will have 3 minutes to make your presentation. I will time you and I will warn you when you have 30 seconds left and inform you when your 3 minutes has expired. Your presentation should then be brought to a halt. No extra time is allowed. All speakers should direct their presentations to amplifying the planning matters they've previously put to us for the benefit of the planning committee. Speakers should restrict their comments to material planning considerations only. Any non-planning issues will be disregarded. Speakers should not introduce any additional information that hasn't previously been brought to the planning authority's attention. And obviously no visual aids or handouts may be allowed. And no members of the public are allowed to take part in the debate once the presentation has been given. We have 3 speakers on this application. We have Laurie Wright, who is objecting. We have Mr. Granger, who is speaking as a representative of Woolston Parish Council as a supporter, and Councillor Heather Timms is speaking as this falls within her division as the county councillor, and the 3 ward councillors are unable to attend this meeting. So I have given dispensation to Councillor Timms to be able to speak on behalf of the ward. Thank you. Right, and the presentation I'm going to hand over now to the planning officer, and it's Jo Orton to present. Over to you, Jo.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just confirm first of all that we can see my presentation, please?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant, thank you. So this application seeks outline planning permission for the erection of up to 48 dwellings with associated open space, landscaping and infrastructure. This is for outline only, with the principal and access being considered at this stage. The access would be taken from Warwick Road. Just a couple of points of clarity. The fourth paragraph of the application proposal states planning application R19-1384. This should actually read R20-0172, which will be heard next. And also within the heads of terms tables, paragraph 11.1, this should read Dyers Lane Recreation Ground, Walston, as opposed to the Jubilee site. In addition to this, I'm also aware of comments and polls on social media relating to this application. However, no verified feedback from these comments and polls has been received as a representation in relation to this application. So whilst members may be also aware of them, they carry little weight in considering this application. Okay, so moving on to the application itself. In front of you, you can see the proposed site layout, which shows the access road coming off of Warwick Road. We also have the proposed area of open space, attenuation building, and the initial indicative layout put forward as part of the proposal. Okay, so in front of you here, we have a few photos of the site. So we've got looking across from the application site over to Warwick Road, looking down the site towards the closest bungalow, which is further down the site. We also have looking down the allotments back towards Stretton Road, and also photo from the access taken near the access point looking down Warwick Road. In terms of the key issues, the main one would be the principle of development in this instance. The emerging neighbourhood plan is down as being designated open space. This document is still within the early stages and therefore only carries limited weight within the determination process. The key documentation, therefore, for the application to be determined under is the Rugby Borough Council Local Plan 2011 to 2031. The application site itself is located within the village boundary of Walston, with policy GP2 stating development will be permitted within existing village boundaries. As the application site is located within the village boundary of Walston, there is a principle in favour of sustainable development, subject to all planning matters being appropriately addressed. Furthermore, policy HS4 states that public open space should not be built upon unless it can be demonstrated that the loss resulting from the proposed development would be replaced with better or equivalent provision than that already in situ. A secondary application has been submitted in conjunction with this application, and this seeks for the reconfiguration of the allotment site following negotiations with the Allotment Association, who stated that there was an oversupply of allotment provision within Walston. As identified within section 1.7 of the committee report, there is a surplus of plots within Walston, which is further evidence on site by the number of vacant plots. The redevelopment of this site would enable the Allotment Association to remain on the existing site and retain their plots, maintaining community cohesion and social networks, and ensuring that the historical association and sentimental value between allotment holders and their plots will not be lost. Should members be minded to approve this application, a Section 106 agreement is considered pertinent to ensure that the allotments are to be delivered, ensuring that there would be no loss of community facility in Walston. This application is therefore considered to be in accordance with policy GP2 and HS4 of the local plan. Moving on to highway safety, a new access is proposed from the Warwick Road. Warwickshire County Council, acting as the Highways Authority, have confirmed that whilst they have some concerns with regard to the layout indicated for the estate roads, due to the outline nature of the application, these concerns can be addressed at the reserve matter stage when the final layout is to be agreed. The indicative layout submitted with the application indicates that the proposal complies with the local authority's parking requirements. And whilst it is noted that house type 4 is a parking space below the requirements, given the amount of parking on site, it is something that can be agreed at the final layout, so it complies in totality with our standards. In terms of other matters, there are no material adverse impacts for flood risk and drainage, landscaping, ecology, land contamination, archaeology and air quality. In relation to character and design and impact on residential amenity, given the outline nature of the application, these would be addressed at reserve matters stage when the following matters will be considered. layout, design, scale, massing and landscaping. Moving on to the planning balance, the proposal is located within the village boundary and main rural settlement of Woolston, which states that development will be permitted within existing boundaries. The scheme would bring a number of benefits, including additional dwellings and affordable housing to local stock, along with the associated short-term economic benefits. The proposal would not have an adverse impact on highway safety, and the development complies with the local plan 2011 to 2031 and the NPPF. The recommendation, therefore, is to approve, subject to conditions, informatives and completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jo. That's a very concise presentation, very clear. Thank you very much indeed. Questions for clarification? I've got two that I'd like to ask. According to the local plan maps that we have all been given, this is actually shown as a designated open space. And according to DS3, our local plan DS3, the proposed housing is indicated to be at Linden Tree Bungalow around 15. It doesn't designate this as an area for housing of up to 48 houses. Could you please clarify that it's designated open space, and can you please clarify the housing?
Yes, certainly, Chair. So whilst this is down as being open space, discussions were had with colleagues in planning policy in relation to the designation as open space and whether or not it can be put forward for housing. And as HS4 allows, it can be used to be built on and developed, given the fact that it is still down as being within the village boundary, and they're providing further provision and improving provision to meet the needs to the site to the rear of the application site.
Thank you, Jo. Although I must admit, I do have concerns that if we're saying one thing in the local plan and then changing it, I have got reservations about that. Councillor Picker, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up, well, 2 points. The first is follow up on the points the Chair's already made regarding the open space designation. You said that the emerging neighbourhood plan for Woolston designated this as open space, but it was at the very early stage. I was just hoping you could clarify for us what exactly you mean by very early stages, and also is there any indication to suggest that that process has been slowed by events of the last few months? And then secondly, if I may, Chair, the affordable housing provision, this obviously meets that. I was just wondering what assurances you could give us that as this is only reserved matters stage, we're confident that the conditions are satisfactory enough that we won't suddenly find half the affordable housing provision disappearing when it comes back as reserved.
Thank you. Jo?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of the, I'll go affordable housing first, sorry. The other one was neighbourhood plan, wasn't it? Apologies for that. So in terms of the affordable housing, they have not as yet found have got a provider or anything on board at the moment, but this would be addressed going forward post granting of outline planning permission should the Borough Council be resolved to approve the application. However, one of the stipulations within the 106 agreement would be the fact that the affordable housing would need to be delivered on the site, ensuring that we would still have policy compliant affordable housing. And in terms of the neighbourhood plan, having discussed this with policies colleagues within planning policy, we are still yet to receive a submission to go out to public consultation at the moment on the neighbourhood plan. So as yet, it still needs to go through public consultation before coming back and getting considered for going through a referendum on there. And as far as I'm aware from what colleagues in policy have said, that the events of the last couple of months from a local authority point of view haven't held things back.
Thank you. Legal want to come in at this point, Sarah?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. And just apologies if there's any bangs. There's fireworks in my neighbour's garden. In relation to the affordable housing point, it's quite common that registered providers aren't on board at this stage, and we cater for that in the Section 106 agreement with occupation restrictions on the market housing.
Thank you. We enjoyed the fireworks. Councillor Roodhouse, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. I've too got fireworks going off just across the back here somewhere. Hopefully all done. In relation, could you confirm if the land is a community asset and is on the register? Because it'd be nice to understand that as well. And also in relation to the plots and everything within the report, is there any waiting list or anything at all? I didn't get a sense from what was written within the report of what the percentages were of those plots and any waiting lists or anything of that nature.
Thank you.
So thank you, Chair. As terms of it being on the community asset register, that is something that I would have to check and get back to you on. But there was no indication from colleagues at the time when I spoke to them. And in terms of I'm unsure on a waiting list at the moment. They are due, as I say, that came forward with there is a surplus of allotments already in Walston at present, and also information submitted in support of the application has confirmed that with the vacant plots that are currently there, the new application for the allotments would ensure that everybody who wanted an allotment would retain and keep them and remove the vacant plots currently on site.
Thank you, but we will be dealing with that one totally separately, won't we? Legal, do you want to come back in?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just to clarify on assets of community value, what that does is essentially provide a moratorium on an owner being able to dispose of their site and offering the community an opportunity to put a bid in for the site. The owner isn't required to accept that bid if they don't want to. It just buys some breathing space for communities to potentially put a bid together. So that wouldn't necessarily be a hindrance to the planning process. But like we say, we can check whether it's on the register or not.
Thank you. Okay, next, Councillor Garcia.
Thank you. I just wondered if you could clarify the affordable housing that Ian had started talking about, because actually I'm still fuming about that last one. So I'd like to know how you work out how many there would be and how that is all pinned down, because I just don't want to get caught on that again.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is Joe or whether it's Sarah.
I was just going to say, Chair, I can confirm that in terms of how it's all calculated, that has been done through the local plan mix, which is broken down within the officer report under 10.5, where it's got the tables and the mix is submitted. But in terms of how it's pinned down within the legal agreement, that would need to be Sarah to answer that, if that's okay, please.
Absolutely. So the Section 106 agreement, which would be entered into prior to any permission being granted, would set out the agreed affordable housing numbers and contain provisions in terms of agreeing tenure and size of those houses. Once that's been signed and agreed, that runs with the land. So on that basis, it's enforceable and we can rely on it. And the way we tend to structure them are that we require affordable housing to be delivered and available for occupation prior to certain percentages of the market housing on site being delivered. I'm not quite sure if that's fully answered your question, Councillor Garcia, or if you've got any further points you want clarifying.
Well, I'm still not clear. I can see where you've got house one and all the rest of it, but how many exactly are we talking about here?
Joe, how many housing?
How many units are we exactly talking about that will be affordable?
It's in the report, isn't it?
Oh, I can't see it. That's why I'm asking the question.
Sorry, I thought
it's Councillor. Sorry, Chair, through you. It's under 10.5 of the report, where it says that the requirements for this application proposal for a mix of up to 48 dwellings, 14 affordable at a level of 30%.
14
right.
Then we're looking
14.
at basically
out of 48.
Affordable from 48. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Is this, because this is outside of the local plan area of designation, is this considered as a windfall development then?
Hang on, can we just clarify? It is not outside the local planners.
Through you, Chair, just to confirm, it isn't one of the designated strategic sites.
No.
However, it is an application that would be able to come forward as part of policy GP2 in the fact that it's located within the existing village boundary of the main rural settlement.
But I think we've already made the point that this is not the designated housing, it's a speculative one, and in fact it's an open space, as we've already mentioned, as it's shown in our local plan. Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Sanderson, you're muted if you're trying to speak.
There we go, Chair. Speaking now. Yeah, just to come back on that point, it's a designated open space and amenity. There would be nothing if they decided in their local plan they wanted to perhaps put some football pitches or cricket pitches in there, they would quite easily do that. My other concern is isn't this area an area of landscape sensitivity, if I remember correctly from the local plan?
Okay, can we have an answer? Is it an area of local sensitivity, as suggested by Councillor Sanderson?
Thank you, Chair. This, yes, it's within the Princethorpe area, and following discussions with our own Parks and Open Spaces team, we consulted the relevant bodies in terms of whether we needed any contributions or anything like that, and they didn't, after many chasing emails and calls, I had no response in relation to any concerns on this application.
Thank you. Okay, right, I'm conscious that we've got 3 speakers waiting. Councillor Gillius, we haven't heard from you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, a number of the questions I was going to ask have been answered, but there's one in particular, and that is from the application report itself, not the officer's report, and that refers to rainwater runoff, because I'm very familiar with that site, and I know that there's a gradual slope down towards the centre of the village. And in the discharge rainwater hierarchy on page 15 of that particular report, it does say that they're looking at the possibility of soakaways, to let the rainwater and runoff go into soakaways or into a watercourse, or a combination of the two. But that's only a desktop study. So I know what in the actual officer's report it mentions condition 14 and 15 to deal with the flood risk and mitigation measures after the permission's been granted. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to know all about this before any permission is granted.
Are you suggesting then that there needs to be a change of the condition terms?
Well, I would think yes, I would say so, yes.
Okay, is that possible? Joe and Sarah?
From my perspective, I would need to speak to the lead flood authority who provide us with the conditions to see whether or not what wording would need to come forward from a legal perspective. I don't know if Sarah can add any more.
Councillors can obviously move a resolution to grant if they're so minded, with an additional part saying they'd like certain conditions re-looked at or reworded. That's not a problem.
Okay. While we're talking about conditions, condition 17, I think you've got 5 years mentioned. We always now say 10 years. So that would need to be amended.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies, I had made a note to mention that under points of clarity. I do have that noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we're now going to move on to our first speaker, and that is Laurie Wright. So if you'd like to unmute yourself, Laurie.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You can also have your camera on, and if you are ready, your 3 minutes starts now.
I am a Woolston Parish Councillor, but I am unable to support the Parish Council's new position, which appears to set aside the objections of the majority of Woolston residents and allotment holders in an endeavour to obtain planning gain from the development of this site. The planning status of this site is its designation as a public open space since at least 1997 and now on the Rugby Borough local plan. In this context, national policy and local plan policy HS4 creates a strong presumption against development of this site and the loss of the allotments. HS4 also provides that any new open space should be appropriately located and should avoid significant loss of amenity to residents. Rugby Borough Council's formal position for many years has been to resist development of this site based on its existing open space use and landscape sensitivity. The 2016 landscape sensitivity study produced by Warwickshire County Council on behalf of Rugby Borough Council, I quote, "The majority of this, meaning Woolston zone, is not appropriate for development due to its openness, prominent skylines and visibility. The allotment area should not be developed in order to preserve the historic small-scale field pattern." End of quote. Furthermore, the Parish Council's own neighbourhood plan identifies the allotment site as a local green space and approved this at their meeting on the 22nd of August 2019. Here are 7 more important reasons this planning application should be rejected. 1. It is contrary to Rugby Borough Council local planning housing trajectory allocation of 15 dwellings for Woolston in this plan period. 2. It is contrary to the local plan windfall development policy. 3. It is contrary to the decisions of both the public consultation and the public meeting held in Woolston Village. 4. It means the loss of more than 6 acres of good quality allotment land used by villagers of both Woolston and Brandon. Already a freeze on recruitment is in place.
30 seconds.
It means the loss of social well-being, a well-being asset, which will reduce the area for social interaction. The lack of a play area on this proposed site will no doubt put a greater burden on the Dawes Lane recreation field. The loss of 2/3 of this allotment land denies the people of Woolston and Brandon the opportunity to grow food for their families and the wider community. In view of all this, and the loss of this community asset, I would ask you to reject the application. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm having problems with the technology now. Oh, gosh. Right, does anybody have a question of clarification for Mr. Wright on what he said? No? Okay, thank you, Laurie. We'll now move on to our second speaker, and that is Mr. Granger. Are you ready, Mr. Granger, if you'd like to unmute and put your camera on?
I'm unmuted with my camera on, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, your 3 minutes starts now.
Chair, councillors, good evening. Woolston Parish Council initially voted to support this application by majority, but have now voted unanimously to speak in its support of this committee, both on our own behalf and those residents of Woolston who also support the application. The proposal would deliver the majority of affordable and local needs, housing which residents of Woolston have identified as needed in a housing needs survey, which all households were invited to complete. The proposal will deliver a housing mix to meet the specific local need identified by residents of Woolston in a neighbourhood plan survey, which all households were invited to complete. The applicant has worked closely with Woolston Parish Council over the last 2 years in order to develop a proposal which specifically identified and supported local need and provides significant planning gains. Local concerns regarding handling of sewage, Woolston suffers from chronic problems with the sewerage system, have been mitigated by the applicant agreeing with Severn Trent that sewage will flow directly to the treatment works, avoiding the centre of Woolston. The application recognises that the existing allotment site at Woolston is considerably oversized for the present level of demand. The area covered by this application has a significant number of long-term vacant plots, and the voluntary maintenance of these is becoming increasingly difficult, leading to it becoming overgrown and neglected. If the current application is approved, the applicant is committed by agreement to a considerable investment for the remaining area of allotments, a replacement plot for all existing potholders, including provision of new sheds or greenhouses, central management.
Right, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Granger. No, you've had to wait a long time. Very explicit in what you had to say there. Does any member of the committee have a question for Mr. Granger? Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick one. You said that you were speaking on behalf of the parish council and the residents who support the application. I'm just looking at the officer's report, and it looks like when the borough did their consultation, they received 6 letters in support and 45 of objection. And obviously we have all 3 borough ward councillors have submitted objections, as has the county division councillor. So I was just going to ask what process the parish council had gone through in terms of consultation in order to reach the conclusions you've just given to the committee.
In terms of reaching the conclusions, the parish council appointed what we called an allotments working group with 3 members of the parish council, 3 councillors, who researched very deeply over a period of about a year and a half what was needed and what recommendation we should make to the parish council. This working group, having considered all aspects of the proposed development, decided that it was in the best long-term interests of Woolston that we had that we support the development. In terms of consultation, the parish council has received emails from residents regarding the application in support of it. We also had a public meeting in which the majority of the people attending the meeting overwhelmingly objected to the application.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there any more questions? No? In that case, we'll move on to our 3rd speaker. So, Mr. Granger, would you like to mute and turn your camera off, please? And then Councillor Timms, are you ready?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, if you'd like to turn your camera on, please, that'd be lovely.
It's on and I'm unmuted.
Right, okay, your 3 minutes starts now.
As you can see from the report, this application was objected to by all 3 borough councillors, and I'm here today to represent them. The site of the Woolston and Brandon Allotment Association is classified as public open space and an asset of community value. Policy HS4C states that public open space should not be built upon unless it can be demonstrated that the loss resulting from the proposed development will be replaced by equivalent or better provision. And I'm going to add what the officer has not told you in terms of quality and quantity in a suitable location. The application to reorganisation of the allotment site cannot be said to provide the same quantity of public open space as is currently in place, and neither over-provision or disuse of any of the area is a reason for public open space to have houses built on it. So this is a reason for refusal. The allotment site and its association play an integral part in the day-to-day fabric of not just Woolston Village, but also Brandon Village, which has not been accounted for in the numbers of space allotments required in the report that you have been given. It only accounts for Woolston Village. The Allotment Association, via the annual Village Produce Show, the biannual Open Gardens, through working with the school, setting up a memory garden and distributing excess produce for local charitable organisation, is an integral part of our village. The MPPF on page 61.13, clause D, point 1, states that the application of policies in this framework that protect areas or assets of particular importance provides a clear reason for refusing the development proposal. I would advocate that the allotment site is very much classified locally as an asset of particular importance for the reasons you have heard tonight, and therefore this constitutes a very valid reason for refusing permission for the development. You have also heard that the local plan designated Woolston to have 15 houses on another Warwick Road site. This site of the Allotment Association is not designated in the local plan, and this provides another reason for reviewing the development proposal. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Timms. Does anybody have any questions of clarification for Councillor Timms? I have one. The local councillors referred to the Memorial Garden and the importance of the Memorial Garden site. Could you clarify the Memorial Garden site for us, please, Councillor Timms?
I cannot, I'm afraid, but it is as part. It is an integral part of the allotment site, which we're looking at developing. Okay. And I don't know whether that has actually been considered by the group that was set up on the reorganisation, because I was only looking at this application, not the second application.
Right, thank you very much. Councillor Sanderson has his hand up. You're muted, Neil.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Are the residents actually getting like for the new plots that are being offered? They seem a lot smaller than the original allotments that were provided.
Do you want me to answer that, Chair?
Yes.
They are.
They are
quite clear.
And I think that's the second application that we're looking at,
yeah,
which is actually referring to the allotments. This is to do with the housing. I think if we can clarify that, please. Would the officer like to come in on this one at all?
Yes, please, Chair. I was just trying to find the hand raise there. Yes, in terms of the allotment size, that is on the next application to be considered. I did have, in terms of the memorial, your question in relation to that, I did have a conversation with the parish council over the location of it, and they've confirmed that, and this has also been confirmed by the agents, that the memorial is located around the orchard, which is to be retained as part of the allotment scheme on the next application.
Thank you. Okay. All right, Neil, does that answer it?
It does, Chair.
Thank you very much. All right. So if there are no more questions for Councillor Timms, Sarah, would you like to manage Councillor Timms leaving the meeting, please, and tell me when I can continue?
Of course, Councillor Timms, very sorry. You're able to carry on.
Councillor.
You will be able to carry on watching on the live stream if you'd like to do so. And we're good to carry on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, then. Right. We're now moving into debate, and the first hand up is Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Great debate and concern around the application of this property as public open space, and I was mindful of the comment that the chair of the parish council made and put very well about the rolling lease on the property on a six-month notice to quit basis, and the offer that there was going to be a 20-year offer there as part of this application. Question for legal, really. If the land is designated public open space and the allotment society is given notice to quit, would that necessarily mean that the land could be developed, or would it still be designated as public open space?
Thank you, Councillor. Good question. The land is designated public open space. That's just how it is in the local plan. So the question will be in terms of planning balance, whether there is material considerations to outweigh the departure from policy to use that land for something other than public open space. The kind of land ownership and current tenancy of that land is not something that's taken into account in the planning process, but it will obviously need to be dealt with if we're minded to grant this application.
Thank you for that. And Chair, I don't know whether I'm allowed to at this stage, but given that, and given the fact that it is public open space, and the loss of public open space these days is extremely important, I certainly would like to move for refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eccleston. Councillor Roodhouse.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points, really. On the policy NE1, which is about biodiversity, and the report, I think there is a direct conflict there within what's being presented to us, and certainly on the open public space and the comments that you made, Chairman, as well about the designation within that. I'd be happy to second Councillor Eggleston in refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roodhouse. Councillor Gillies.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This, of course, for me is an extremely important issue because as councillors, we've got to, and it's our bounden duty to encourage, community involvement in these matters and the decision-making process. And a good example of that is the public input into our local plan. And the local plan was agreed by both the inspector, the government inspector, and the council itself. So this it's just got to have the confidence of the public, as the alternative is no public involvement. And of course, that'll be an absolute disaster and lead to no trust in the process or its outcomes. When we all know in DS3 in our local plan, it allocates 15 houses for Woolston. And it's pretty clear from what the discussions we've heard so far that Woolston's gradually emerging neighbourhood plan allocates this land as open space, and certainly in the light of the present pandemic situation, the land would be best suited to remain as allotments and open space, certainly for the present community to enjoy and be really proud of. So we really need to help our neighbourhoods build on the needs of their communities and not build over their cherished assets. So I support refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said by the councillors that spoke before me. I think this is an open space, that it is in conflict with our local plan policies on that and on open green spaces, but also I must confess I am wholly unconvinced by the suggestion that because at this moment the allotments aren't being fully utilised, that it's an opportunity to almost downsize, as if use it or lose it is an argument which can be applied to open space. I don't think that's what our policies encourage or what this committee should encourage. So I would support refusal, and I think actually, as Councillor Gillies has alluded, I think these kinds of open spaces are going to be more important in the future, not less.
Thank you. Councillor Butlin.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question really, because I'm mindful of the fact that with the problems we had with Oakfield development and all the debate we had on that one. Now, as I understand it, this is in private ownership, and it's designated as a public open space by the very fact that it's allotments. And those allotments are subject to kind of a notice to quit within 6 months. I understand and I kind of sympathise with some of the views that have already been expressed in terms of those that have kind of gone for a refusal. But I'd like clarity. Is this at all possible, subject to us refusing this, that the owners then should basically kind of like give notice to the allotment owners, put a fence around this designated open space because it's no longer used as allotments, and it sits there until then another application comes in. It's no longer public open space because there's no access to it. So I need some clarity on that, because I don't want to kind of basically refuse this and then find ourselves staring down the kind of a possibility of having to kind of reconsider this application at a later date by view of the fact that we've overlooked the question of ownership.
Okay. I'm not sure who can answer that one. Sarah?
Yep, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Butlin, that is a very valid point, and whilst ownership of land is not a consideration from a planning point of view, as you're well aware of, it's a good point you raise, and essentially it's exactly the same situation as we had on Oakfield Recreation Ground, which Planning Committee will be familiar with. the nature of open space designations, they don't all belong to the council. Some are in private ownership, and we don't have control over whether they are necessarily publicly accessible. But just because they're not publicly accessible doesn't mean they don't have value as open space for other reasons. But that doesn't in any event prevent the owner of that open space deciding to fence it off and presenting access for the public in the same manner as happened on Oakfield Recreation Ground.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is that we appear to be only be giving lip service to our local plan, considering the amount of effort that went into it and how many people were involved in the consultation. 3,000, I think, I'll just remind you. It is a designated open space. We shouldn't put ideas into the owner's mind by having loose conversations at this meeting. And I will suggest I will be supporting refusal because it is a designated open space and because it has significant landscape sensitivity. There's nothing stopping the parish council and the emerging neighbourhood local plan taking that into consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Eccleston, is your hand still up, or is this another point, please?
It's another point.
Thank you.
I mean, this kind of stems from my first question and Councillor Butler's question as well, I guess. If there are public rights of way over that property, though, surely that it couldn't be fenced off.
Through you, Chair, yeah, if there are any public rights of way, those public rights of way can't be blocked off or obstructed in any way, but the rest of the land could be.
Okay, so can we have clarification, please, Joe? Are there any public rights of way? And this memorial garden that has been referred to, I'm assuming that that has a public right of access.
So let me just see if I can get back onto the presentation. I'll try and show you roughly whereabouts it is. Bear with me, Chair, won't be a moment. Right. Can you see the presentation again?
I've got planning, balance and recommendation at the moment. Okay. Right, we're back to maps and photos. Right, that's the site plan now.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Chair. So it's not clear on this plan. It will be clearer on the allotment application. And if members wanted me to, I can go on to the other plan.
No, we'll deal with them separately, please.
It was just to show you the location of where the allotment, the orchard is, but the orchard's down here in this location just off of the map. When I initially looked into any constraints which were on the site, at the time of registering the application, there was no formal public right of way or anything which was flashing up, which would have caused concern to the Warwickshire County Council highways, and the main access at present into the site, not highways, sorry, public rights of way, apologies, is through here off Stretton Road.
Thank you. Right, hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Sanderson. Or was it Councillor? No, it's Councillor Eccleston. Councillor Sanderson, your hand is still up. Is that?
Yes, thank you.
Is that another? No. Okay, fine. Right. Now we've had lots of suggestions as to why this should be refused, contrary to the local plan and the designated open space, contrary to DS3. And I have to say I've forgotten which bit of the MPPF was quoted. Can somebody remind me which bit of the MPPF was it contrary to? No.
If we talk about open space, Chair, we're talking about, I think it's paragraph 100.
I thought Councillor Timms also mentioned another one that it was contrary to. Sarah?
I think Councillor Timms did cite the MPPF, but no member has raised that in their reasons for refusal, so we wouldn't put that in.
Okay, thank you. All right then. Right, so just to clarify then, that refusal has been proposed by Councillor Eccleston, seconded by Councillor Roodhouse, because this is contrary to our local plan, which was consulted on, which everybody had a chance to comment on, and has been accepted and gone through the inspectorate. And it's most particularly contrary to DS3, which is where the housing allocation identifies 15 at Linden Tree and not this particular site. Right, am I clear on that, Sarah? Can you just clarify?
Thank you, Chair. I think also open space was cited as another reason for refusal,
yes,
by members. And I think we just need some delegated authority to officers to draft the full reason for refusal based on those reasons given by members.
Yes, yes, definitely.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. OK, then, in that case, all those who are voting for refusal, would you please show now? Claire, how are we doing?
That's 9 for refusal.
9 for refusal. OK, if you'd like to take your hands down. Those who are not in favour of refusal, who are against refusal, please show. That's 3.
Yes, Chair, that's 3.
And no abstentions. OK, in that case, that application is refused. Thank you very much. And Sarah, can you confirm when Mr. Wright and Mr. Granger have left the meeting, please?
Thank you, Chair, I will do. They've both now left the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, in that case, we are going to move on to the next application. Councillor Gillies, do you have your hand in the air?
Yes, Chair, I just wanted to make mention of rights of way and footpaths, because they're a very odd thing, you know, footpaths, because they're not the same as footways, which are the things that you go by the side of a road. Footpaths are a bit special, because if you've been going over them for a number of years, you've established a right of way. So, you know, I don't know how long those things have been allotments, but it could have been established that there's footpaths across them for some time, you know, so that needs looking into.
OK, Sarah from Legal, would you like to respond?
Yep, thank you, Councillor Gillies is absolutely correct. There is a way to establish footpath and public rights of way by continued use, usually for a period of 20 years, and there has to have been no obstruction during that period. They don't arise automatically. They do have to be claimed and registered, and that's usually done at the point at which they're about to be taken away. But it is a point worth bearing in mind.
OK, thank you very much for that. All right, I'm sure Councillor Gillies, as the parish champion, will pass that information back. Right, we move on to the next application, R20/0172 at Woolston Allotments, and Jo Orton, over to you again.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, can you just confirm that my presentation's up all okay?
Yes, it is.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this application seeks full planning permission for the reconfiguration of the existing allotment plots, including the demolition of the existing sheds and storage facilities, the erection of a new allotment management and storage building, along with enhanced access, parking, landscaping in association with the erection of the 48 dwellings on land south of Warwick Road. Access to the site would be taken from Stretton Road. Okay, on the site layout plan, which you can see in front of you, the existing site access off Stretton Road is located down in this area. And we've got this existing path, which was shown on the previous application, which runs down to the allotment land. We've also got the new storage building and the areas for parking vehicles and the new allotments with their proposed layout. So moving on to the proposed elevations, it's the proposed elevation put forward for the storage building and management building on site, including a meeting space, workshop, garage, DIY storage and trading, kitchen and some bathroom facilities. In terms of the site photos of the aerial, you can see down here the location where the proposed orchard is going to be and the memorial gardens. And this section here is the area for consideration this time. So we've got a photo here of the existing site entrance going into the allotment. Got a photo looking down across the site where the allotment's in situ. We also have another photo looking across down towards Stretton Road, and also a photo looking out towards the open fields. Key issues on the application, again, is the principle of development. The application site is located within the green belt, where the provision of appropriate facilities for allotments would constitute appropriate development. This is on the proviso the facilities preserve the openness of the green belt and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. The storage facilities would replace the existing storage building and will be sited within the centre of the site, circa 26 metres from the defined boundary. The site will encompass the allotments, access and landscaping with no built development, with removal of temporary sheds, greenhouses and providing a single communal building. The proposal also adds a volume of 683.32 cubic metres to the green belt through the provision of the storage building, which would result in some impact on the openness of the green belt. The proposals are not uncommon for this type of development and would therefore not be sufficient to warrant refusal of the application. In addition, when considering the NPPF definition, the allotment site is located outside of the village boundary and therefore does not constitute previously developed land. As such, any future applications would by definition be inappropriate development. As identified within section 1.7 of the committee report, there is a surplus of plots in Woolston, which is further evidenced on site by the number of vacant plots. The redevelopment of the site would enable the allotment association to remain on the existing site and retain their plots. This will maintain the existing community cohesion and social networks and ensure that the historical association and sentimental value between allotment members and their plots will not be lost. Whilst this note obviously made reference to whether should the previous application have been recommended for approval, apologies. However, as the application has been refused, this application still can, as it's a full application, be considered within its own merits and any decision either way being issued accordingly. This application is therefore considered to be in accordance with policy GP2 and HS4 of the local plan. In terms of character and appearance, the footprint and eaves and ridge height of the building are being kept to a minimum to reduce the impact on the character and appearance of the area and the openness of the green belt. The storage building has been well designed to have the appearance of an agricultural building, ensuring that it is run in conjunction with the surrounding area and countryside. Appropriate materials have been proposed which would be in keeping with the setting of the allotments and surrounding agricultural land. As such, it is therefore considered to be in accordance with the local plan policy SDC 1 and section 12 of the NPPF. In terms of highway safety, the existing access from Stretton Road is to be utilised. Warwickshire County Council Highways have confirmed they have no objections to the proposal, subject to appropriate conditions and informatives. The local plan or planning obligations, SPD, do not contain any parking standards for allotment land. The layout submitted with the application indicates that 21 car parking spaces will be provided, along with 17 additional lay-by spaces. The existing site has the use of approximately 13 unmarked spaces, with the proposal therefore providing an additional 25 parking spaces to land users. Given the increase in spaces, along with the sustainable location of the allotment land, it is not considered the proposal will result in an adverse impact on parking within the locality. In terms of other key matters in relation to the application, there are no material adverse impacts for neighbouring residential dwellings, land contamination, flood risk and drainage, landscaping and ecology. In terms of planning balance, the development would constitute appropriate development within the green belt. The proposed storage building will cause little harm to the role and purposes of the green belt. The reconfiguration of the site allows for the inclusion of a communal area, enhancing opportunities for community activities, providing greater social cohesion. The proposal will not have an adverse impact on highway safety, and the development complies with Local Plan 2011 to 2031 and the NPPF. The recommendation, therefore, is to approve subject to conditions and informatives. Thank you, Chair.
Right, thank you, Joe. Very concise, very clear presentation. So we'll now move into questions for clarification. Has anybody got a question of clarification for Joe? Okay, I've got a hand up. Can't see whose hand it is. Councillor Roodhouse, got you.
Thank you, Chair. It partly goes on, but I'd still like clarification about the asset of community value from the last one. Also, I'd like to know how did the officers just use a 2015 report and on the allotment land, and did they use any calculations from the guidance for allotment disposal, which is given out by the government, or did they just rely on the local plan?
Thank you. Okay, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I confirm the application was located on the register, and in terms of the provision that was taken from the documents that we have within the local authority and from the 2015 document and using the local plan.
Okay. Do you want to come back on that, Councillor Roodhouse?
I think the 2015 plan in relation to allotments, there is statutory guidance. I know it's not a statutory allotment land, but there is guidance on about the number of plots, plot holders, waiting list, and the loss. And there is going to be a loss of 42. And I'm just wondering why we didn't do a bit more work into that.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? Okay, so move into debate. Is somebody going to move? Approval, refusal? Councillor Butlin.
There's little much to say about this other than move for approval.
Okay. Councillor Picker.
Seconded.
Thank you. Councillor Cranham.
Sorry, Chair, was that me?
Yes, that's you.
Yeah, well, I'll support approval in the hope the pigs might fly.
Councillor Gillies.
Well, yes, Chair. It's it's a seasonal thing, isn't it? When you wouldn't take on an allotment if you knew that they're all going to be dug up and houses built on the site. So that's probably why there isn't much of a take up on the allotments. But as far as parish councils go, they have a duty to provide allotments to their parishioners should the need arise. So I do support this particular application because it'll be a good scheme, and so I support it.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree with what's been said. Certainly in the climate that we're living in, and with the pandemic, the use of open spaces and people wanting to grow more food and get out and garden is certainly become more important. And I think improvements to the allotments can only be to the good and not the detriment. Right. Councillor Butlin, Councillor Cranham, you've still got your hands up. Is this another point? Nope. In that case, we're ready to move straight into a vote, I think. So all those in favour of approving this application, would you please show? How's that, Claire?
I've only got, oh, sorry, we've got 10 hands now, so that's 10-4.
10-4, thank you. If you'd like to take your hands down. And then anybody against? I've still got 2 hands. All right, anybody against? Any abstentions? So we lost two hands somewhere along the way. 2 people didn't
yes,
vote.
it looks that way, Chair. Perhaps might.
Do you want me to do the vote again then?
Try again.
Okay, those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous now, Chair.
That's unanimous now, is it? Okay, right. In that case, that one is definitely approved. Thank you very much, Joe. You've done a lot of hard work tonight, so many thanks for that. So we now move on to agenda item 6, which is the diversion of part of Bridleway RB30 Ashlawn Road. Who's going to be talking on this one? Is it you, Joe?
Apologies. I believe this one was Sarah, if that's still okay.
Is it Sarah? That's fine.
Hello, yes, it is me, Chair. Apologies, I'm just getting the document up in front of me. This is in relation to the diversion of a bridleway at Ashlawn Road, which I'm sure you'll all be familiar with. There's not a lot to say in relation to this other than that the objections that were originally raised have all now been resolved. So this report comes to you with no objections, and we're just asking for members to confirm the diversion order that is now unopposed.
Thank you. Okay, so can we have hands in the air to confirm, please?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, everybody. If you'd like to lower your hands.
Appreciated, thank you.
And we move on to agenda item 7, delegated decisions. Joe, are you going to take this one, please?
Yes, so the delegated decision lists are included to note in the register, Chair.
Okay, so we just need to have hands in the air to say noted. Okay, is that everybody, Claire?
Got 11.
Who haven't we got? Councillor Sanderson hasn't.
That's unanimous, Chair.
That's unanimous. Thank you. Hands down then. And is that it? That's it, isn't it? We've done. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that concludes then.
Sorry, Chair. There's just item 5 was advance notice of site visit.
Oh, sorry, have I missed it again? It's trying to juggle things. Right, do we have any advance notice of site visits? Not that we can make any. No?
No, Chair, we haven't received any requests for site visits.
Thank you very much. Right, is there anything else that I have forgotten, Claire? Or have we covered it all now?
That's it, Chair. No, all agenda items covered.
Okay. In that case, can I thank councillors and officers for their attendance and their input into tonight's meeting. It's been very thorough discussion and debate on all of the applications, and I hope to all of those people from the public who have been watching that they have found it instructive and informative and can appreciate why the decisions have been made in the way they have. So thank you and good evening, and you may now stop the streaming, please, Maria.